India and Israel have been allies for much of recent history, although the relations between these two countries have been low profile and only started getting global attention in recent years. Besides having strong economic ties, the two countries also share key strategic and military cooperation. Surprisingly, India-Israel relations were largely informal until 1991. Despite having some ties since the 1960s, mainly owing to defence and intelligence cooperation, India did not formalize diplomatic relations due to having a pro-Arab and pro-Palestinian stance. However, this gradually changed when they formally established diplomatic relations with Israel in 1992. I'm your host Kasim, welcome to another KJ vid. Just before we begin, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where you can help to fund our videos and make KJ vids self-sustainable. Sadly, due to the nature of our videos, YouTube consistently demonetizes them as they apparently fit in the politically sensitive category. You can also access our full reports and exclusive content by becoming our Patreon member from as little as $1 per month. India recognized Israel as early as 1950, but did not establish diplomatic ties until 1992. During the Suez Crisis in 1956, the then Israeli Foreign Minister Moshe Sharett visited India as the Israeli army pushed into Egypt after Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the canal, whilst India played the role of mediator alongside the UK, the US and Yugoslavia. During the Sino-Indian War in 1962, Indian PM Jawaharlal Nehru sought arms from Israel, writing to Israeli Prime Minister Ben-Gurion, and he responded, forming the foundations for defence cooperation between the two countries. This paved the way for increased bilateral cooperation over the years, as India sought more arms in their war with Pakistan in 1965 as well as in 1971. Throughout much of the 70s and 80s, India kept its distance from Israel publicly due to its support for the Palestinian cause. India was a founding member of the non-aligned movement that was supportive of anti-colonial struggles around the world, which explains their support for the Palestine Liberation Organization. India was astonishingly one of the first non-Arab states to recognize Palestinian independence. There were several geopolitical issues that shaped India's standpoint during the 1970s and 80s. The seemingly antagonist position between India and Israel also involved India's diplomatic strategy of trying to counter Pakistan's influence in the Arab world, as well as safeguarding its oil supplies from the Gulf. There were other major motives behind India's anti-Israel stance. India has a large Muslim population, and their antagonism towards Israel played a major role in delaying diplomatic relations, as politicians feared that they may lose Muslim votes in key regions if they were to formalize ties. Also was the fact that thousands of Indian citizens worked in the Gulf, helping keep its foreign exchange reserves afloat. Even before establishing formal ties, India and Israel managed to collaborate in specific areas, with India's main intelligence agency RAW and Israel's Mossad having signed a secret cooperation agreement in the areas of security, intelligence and military equipment. The two top intelligence agencies established relationships since the 1960s. This was remarkable because throughout the 1970s and 80s, their bilateral relations were sour. The situation started to shift in 1989 as three major developments sowed the seeds of change. First, the beginning of the era of coalition politics in India. Secondly, the beginning of Pakistan-sponsored insurgency in Kashmir. And finally, the breakup of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, coupled with the fallout from the reversal of Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. Since the early 1990s, the growing insurgent activities in Kashmir, sponsored by Pakistan heightened regional security environment of India, the then opposition party BJP kept pressurizing the government to normalize relations with Israel. After the end of the Cold War, India, like many other countries, had to make major changes to their foreign policy to accommodate the changing international milieu. It went towards economic liberalization, opening its doors to other nations, and subsequently formalized diplomatic relations with Israel. It did, however, keep a low profile due to India's interests in the Middle East. India gave a number of reasons to justify the 1992 opening of formal relations, which are as follows. The first reason was Israel's criticality to what happens in West Asia and the Gulf. that is a part of India's extended neighbourhood, impacting its strategic space, energy supplies and the 6 million Indians living in the region. Secondly, the sophisticated defence equipment, technology and systems from Israel, potential cooperation in security and defence, including counter-terrorism. Thirdly, the absence of any quid pro quo from the Arab states. And finally, agricultural prowess, including related technologies of Israel. More recently, the economic rivalry between India and China plays a role in this context. The growing relations between China and Pakistan have raised insecurities, especially the fact that Pakistan are the largest recipient of Chinese arms. These issues gave India more reasons to build up their own arms, and as Israel are among the top arms manufacturers in the world with one of the best research and development facilities, as well as a supposedly good counter-terrorism unit, there are more reasons to increase cooperation in the field of security and defence. Ariel Sharon was the first Israeli Prime Minister to visit India in 2003, and the bilateral relations between the two nations started gaining publicity. State visits from officials started to take place since the establishment of diplomatic relations. This laid the framework for further cooperation in various areas. There were agreements on cooperation in the field of health sciences and medicine, and on cooperation in combating illicit trafficking and the abuse of narcotic drugs and psychotic substances was signed in 2003. In the same year, more significant agreements were signed in the field of protection of the environment, and another on the exemption of visa requirements of holders of diplomatic, official and service passports. By 2005, there was a MOU on India-Israeli research and development, while in 2006 a major pact was signed in the field of agriculture cooperation. Bilateral trade between the two countries progressed rapidly since 1992. From a base of $200 million in 1992, comprising primarily of diamonds and merchandise trade, and the overall figure stood at an astonishing $5 billion in 2011. In 2016, the figure slumped to $4 billion, with the balance of trade in Israel's favour. Trade in diamonds constitutes over 53% of bilateral trade between the countries. After China and Hong Kong, India is Israel's third largest trading partner in Asia. Currently, the sectors forming the diversified bilateral trade include pharmaceuticals, agriculture, IT and telecom, and homeland security. India's major exports to Israel include precious stones and metals, chemical products, textiles and textile articles, while major exports from Israel include precious stones and metals, chemicals and mineral products, base metals and machinery and transport equipment. Cooperation between the two nations increased dramatically ever since the election of India's new Hindu nationalist BJP government led by Narendra Modi in 2014. This was followed by a first ever visit by an Israeli defence minister in 2015. The current Prime Ministers Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel and Modi of India met for the first time at a UN General Assembly in 2014, where they discussed economic, technological and agricultural collaboration for the future, while Netanyahu expressed his concerns about a nuclear Iran and the spread of radical Islam throughout the Middle East. In 2017, Modi made a standalone visit to Israel, the first ever by an Indian PM. Just a week before Modi's historic visit, Netanyahu's cabinet agreed on measures aimed at increasing Israel's non-diamond exports to India by 25%, while establishing a new $40 million joint innovation, research and development fund. Earlier this year, in July 2018, Israel's aerospace industry signed an agreement with India's KSU to operate Israeli taxi-bot semi-robotic vehicles at India's New Delhi and Mumbai airports. Taxi-bot is connected to planes which taxi the airplanes from the airport's jet bridge without the use of the airplane's main engines. Israel in recent years has taken a strategic decision aimed at strengthening economic relations with China, Japan and India. Major Indian software companies including TCS, Infosys, Tech Mahindra and Wipro have begun to penetrate the Israeli market. During Prime Minister Modi's visit in July 2017, the first meeting of the newly established India-Israel CEOs Forum took place. Defence cooperation forms one of the strongest aspects of the bilateral relations between India and Israel. India is the largest buyer of Israeli military equipment, while Israel is India's largest customer after Russia. Israel produces some of the most sophisticated cutting-edge weapon systems in the world, and India have been major buyers for a while now. India buys weapon systems for the armed forces, including the Navy and Air Force. Since the 1990s, India purchased UAVs, drones, airborne early warning and control radar systems, anti-tank missiles, and many more weapon systems in deals worth billions of dollars. In 2007, the two nations signed a $2.5 billion deal to develop an anti-aircraft weapon system in India. And in 2009, Israel sold Barak-8 air defense systems to India for a staggering $1.1 billion. In 2011, the Indian Army bought more than 1,000 units of Israeli 95 assault rifles to use in counter-insurgency operations. In 2011, there were reports of a deal in which India were to purchase a large number of Israeli Spike anti-tank missiles, launchers and related equipment worth nearly $1 billion from Israel's Rafael advanced defense systems. Although the old contract with Rafael was cancelled, India has recently been on the verge of signing a $500 million deal with Israel to buy 4,500 Spike missiles in a government-to-government purchase which could be finalised any moment. Israel also provides India with military technologies and strategies for counter-terrorism, including offering assistance following the 2008 Mumbai attacks. In 2015, India abstained from voting against Israel at the UN Human Rights Commission, signalling a shift in its Israel-Palestine policy. However, in 2017, it voted for an Arab-sponsored resolution that rejected the US recognition of Jerusalem as a capital of Israel. Despite a recent setback taking place due to India having voted against the US recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, the bilateral relations between the two nations have been growing stronger since the arrival of Modi, making way for a new era of collaboration. In early 2018, Saudi Arabia opened its airspace for the first time ever to a commercial flight to Israel, with the inauguration of an Air India route between New Delhi and Jerusalem. It seems today that the history of advocacy for the Palestinian cause is gradually diminishing as India is growing in alliance with Israel in more areas of cooperation and assistance. While India racks up more arms deals and equips its military with more sophisticated weapon systems and technology, it will be interesting to see further developments, especially in the field of defence and security cooperation, and to see what their main objectives are. That's all for today guys, thanks for watching another KJ vid. We would love to hear your views in the comments below. Finally, don't forget to support us on Patreon so we can produce more of these geopolitical reports. That's all for today, see you next time.